fast, and we found that it had a lazy turbo, so we changed the turbos out, and the next day they took their rating, and we saved that company a lot of money. And I had the most wonderful ride there ever was against across the desert. The other thing I saw in Chile, there were some nitrate mines in Chile, and the nitrate was used to make explosives during World War I and World War II. And there was a lot of people that died in that area, and the process of mining was really hot, and it's hard work with pick and shovel. And they died, and then of course the product that they produced killed a lot of other people. But there were some interesting bone structures and interesting cemetery markings. All of the markings were made of wooden crosses and things that people had carved into the wood, and because of the dry desert, it was in perfect condition. And I still have a lot of slides, pictures of that, where they buried their own. And their family probably never saw them again or never knew what happened to them, but they died in the desert. And there were also several graves that had been dug up, and the bones were bleached white and made for rather interesting pictures.
I can imagine.
And I think I'll dig those up someday. They might be worth something, if, assuming they're still have not deteriorated over the years. But I've always carried a camera with me. I've had a camera since I was 15 years of age. I bought a camera at a local camera store and went through 5 rolls of film before I learned how to load it. The camera would flip in there, and I'd close the gate, and when I advanced it, it never advanced. And after the 5th roll of film, I learned how to load the camera. And I took all kinds of pictures of guys jumping over high jumps at the high school track and stuff, catch them in midair and take their picture, and I never was able to show it to them. But I learned the hard way on how to load a camera. And later on I started, my wife was making wedding cakes, and I took a few pictures of our daughter, who was a flower girl, at our best friend's daughter's wedding. And I took a lot of pictures at that wedding so that we could have them of Kathy and of my daughter Andrea. And they turned out pretty good. I used professional film, professional camera, and apparently did a pretty good job, because when Pat came to bring the cake pieces back, she said, "Who took these pictures?" My wife says, "Well, Bill did it." And she says, "Those are good pictures. It's good.
Good
Can we
quality.
buy some?" Dot says, "Yes, I suppose you can, So she took them home, showed them to her daughter, and everybody liked them. And Virgil Parker, who was the leading photographer in Columbus at the time, and was until he died, really, he was a great photographer, and I actually ended up outselling Virgil, numbers of pictures wise, and I didn't take any of the same pictures that he did. And with the exception of the bridal portrait. And as a result of that, I thought, maybe I should be taking wedding pictures. And so at this point in time, I counted up to 950, and I think there's some I didn't count. I probably have taken approximately 1,000 weddings. Don't know percentage-wise how many of them are still married, but probably more than half, because I think I have a pretty good batting average. Not that it has anything to do with my pictures, but the people were just lucky to stay together. I'm still taking wedding pictures, and I still enjoy it. It's a lot of wedding photographers stop being wedding photographers as soon as they build up their business. People are getting harder to please today, I think. And but I'm still having good luck with people, and I still enjoy it. And probably I'll quit one of these days when I can no longer carry a camera or something, But it's a lot of fun, and a lot of interesting things happen at a wedding.
Do you have any interesting stories?
Well, I had one girl that was going to sue the flower woman because the roses were just not quite the right color of yellow. And,
So they were yellow, but not the right color.
but not the right shade. And when she came to order her picture, she told me, she said, Bill, says, I think I'm going to sue her. She was 15 minutes late, and the flowers were just later than she said she would be, and the flowers were not quite the right shade of yellow. And I says, you know, you might have a problem. I says, because nobody knows what color of yellow they should have been, and it's your word really against hers. And I says, you know, you're eating your heart out for nothing. You know, what can you gain? You know, you need to go on with life, and just being upset about a shade of a color doesn't really compute. And I says, you're not being fair to yourself. It was interesting that the groom was 45 minutes late and she never said a word. I thought maybe later on she might want to sue him too, I didn't know. But it made me think real seriously about getting some insurance, you know, from PP of A to protect yourself against people that go off like that. As far as I know, she never did. She never sued.
You think it had to do with what you told her?
I think it might have. I think, you know, I worked real hard with her because she was having a rough time. She really was. And I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to get any pictures. She was crying because the lady was late, and then they were the wrong color, supposedly. And I had a rough time getting pictures. I mean, it was not the easiest wedding I ever shot.
Do you think maybe she was just freaking out a little bit?
I think there's a possibility that she was. I've never really had problems with a bride. In all the weddings I've shot, I did have a groom pass out one time during the wedding, and the wedding had to be postponed to get him back on his feet. I had a ring bearer, a little boy that fainted at a wedding, and as he fainted, he turned and he fell on the front pew with his teeth. His teeth hit that old oak bench, and when he came, he got back up and he stood there through the wedding ceremony. And when he came down the aisle and came out through the back doors, I looked at his mouth, and I thought, he really needs some attention. So when his dad came back, I told him, I said, you know, son, I'm an EMT, not a doctor. I said, but I think he needs stitches. You know, he really hit hard.
So what happened?
Well, his dad took him to the hospital immediately, and when he came back to the reception, he looked like he was a stuffed mummy or something. He had a lot of stitches in his mouth. That kid was so brave that, you know, he withstood the pain. And he was there at the reception having fun as much as he could have. But those are the only serious incidents that I've had. The worst wedding I ever had was my own, and I didn't know if I was going to live through that one or not. I stayed about a block and a half away from the church at my wife's grandmother's house. She wasn't, I think she had died by that time. I don't know. No, she just wasn't there. So I spent the night at her house, so I'd be close to that church. And during the night, I had a horrible nightmare that I got to the church late. And that as I approached the church, my wife-to-be was standing in the door of the church, crying. And mascara was running down and had stained her wedding gown, which was strange because she never wore mascara, but in this dream she did. And I woke up and it was about 3:30, and I called about every half hour to ask the operator